An old man advances with difficulty, leaning on a cane. Beside him walks Death, wrapped in a red cloak and holding a scythe. From a distance, an angel observes the scene, and in the foreground, the naked corpse of a woman lies on the ice. The landscape is completely desolate. Everything is frozen, and the only trace of life comes from a few crows, patiently waiting for the perfect moment to strike. This painting is called Ahasuerus at the End of the World and was created in 1880 by the symbolist artist Adolf Hirémy-Hirschl. Ahasuerus is the central figure of one of the most unsettling legends in European tradition, known as the myth of the Wandering Jew. According to the medieval legend, Ahasuerus was a Jew living in Jerusalem at the time of Christ. When Jesus was carrying the cross on his way to Calvary, exhausted and on the verge of collapsing, Ahasuerus mocked him and refused to let him rest. As punishment, Christ told him that he would never be allowed to die and would be forced to walk the earth until his return. From that moment on, Ahasuerus was condemned to wander endlessly, unable to find rest until the end of time. For centuries, this story functioned as a warning. It was a religious tale about divine punishment, guilt, and what can happen when a human being shows no compassion toward the sacred. But in the 19th century, something important changes. Europe entered a period of transformation. Traditional faith began to crack, science advanced, cities expanded, and with them emerged a new sensation, the feeling of living at the end of something. It is precisely at this moment that the myth of the Wandering Jew stopped being merely a religious story and became a profoundly modern symbol. 19th century artists and writers no longer saw Ahasuerus only as a sinner punished by God, but as a tragic figure condemned to exist while everything around him falls apart, a perpetual witness to the world's decay. And this is where symbolism comes in. This artistic movement, as we have discussed many times on this channel, was not interested in representing realistic scenes. On the contrary, it sought to express inner ideas, states of the soul, and the deep obsessions of the era: eternal guilt, decay, death, the passage of time, or even the end of humanity. Things that were not visible, but that everyone felt. And Ahasuerus fit perfectly into this vision. He became the ideal symbol of eternity as punishment, of life as a sentence, of a human being forced to keep walking even when there is nothing left worth living for. That is why, when Adolf Hirémy-Hirschl decides to represent this man, he does not paint him walking through cities, crossing paths with other people, or being recognized as a legendary figure. Instead, he places him in the only logical setting symbolism could offer him, at the end of the world. Now, to begin analyzing this painting, we must start at the center of the scene, because everything in this work is constructed around the figure of Ahasuerus. Hirémy-Hirschl depicts him as an exhausted old man, hunched over, his body defeated by the weight of time. He leans on a cane, not as a symbol of power or authority, but as a physical necessity in order to keep moving forward. Ahasuerus is not painted as a legendary traveler or as a glorious witness to the end of the world, but as someone who has walked for too long, for far too long, and whose punishment has not ended even when everything else has already disappeared. This is the central idea of the painting. Ahasuerus has survived even the end of the world, but not because he is strong, nor because he was chosen. He survives because he is condemned to do so. His existence is not a privilege, but a burden. The world has ended, yet he remains, forced to continue when there is nothing left worth living for. Beside him walks Death, wrapped in a red cloak that sharply contrasts with the frozen landscape. Death holds the symbolic scythe, but it is not used. This detail is essential to understanding the painting. Death is present, accompanying Ahasuerus, yet unable to take him. For any other human being, death would mark the natural end, the final rest. But for Ahasuerus, even that is denied. The constant proximity of death makes his punishment even more cruel because it reminds him that release exists, just not for him. On the other side of the scene appears an angel. Its presence is subtle. This angel represents hope, but not a comforting or active hope. It is distant and passive, existing only as a possibility, never intervening. Ahasuerus is trapped between two opposing forces: death, which cannot free him, and hope, which never comes close enough to save him. In the foreground, lying on the ice, is the naked body of a woman. She is not meant to be a specific individual. The artist paints her without clothes in order to strip her of identity. She represents dead humanity itself, the confirmation that life has vanished. In front of this motionless body, Ahasuerus remains standing, and this contrast reinforces the absurdity of his fate. The world is dead, yet he continues to exist. Around the body, several crows gather. They are not attacking yet, but they wait patiently for the right moment. The crows symbolize inevitable decay, the process that continues even after the end, reminding us that although humanity has disappeared, degradation does not stop. As for the landscape, the artist chooses to depict the end of the world as a frozen wasteland, empty, without cities, without architecture, and without any trace of civilization. There are no cultural or historical references left. The world has been reduced to a cold and indifferent space. All of this follows a clearly symbolist language. Adolf Hirémy-Hirschl uses allegorical figures such as death, hope, and humanity to express ideas as abstract as eternal guilt, the condemnation of time, and the impossibility of escaping punishment. For this painting to make even more sense, it is worth pausing for a moment to look at the person who created it, someone we have not mentioned until now. But before we do, I would like to remind you that if you would like to have this painting in your own collection, you can purchase it through our website. Worldwide shipping is completely free, and just like in the video you are watching, our reproductions allow you to start building your own art collection and turn your home into a personal museum. You will find the link in the description if you would like to place an order. Now, let us continue. Adolf Hirémy-Hirschl was an artist with a very solid academic background. He was trained within a tradition that placed great importance on technical mastery, carefully constructed compositions, and the ability to tell clear stories through painting. His work belongs to the world of late 19th century European grand painting, the kind that was exhibited in official salons and institutional spaces. This point matters because Hirémy-Hirschl was not a marginal painter or a radical experimental artist. He was a respected figure in his time, recognized and even awarded during his career. The problem is that he lived and worked during a deeply unstable historical moment. At the end of the 19th century, Vienna was going through a contradiction. It was a brilliant cultural capital, refined and cosmopolitan, yet at the same time it was beginning to feel exhausted. The political, social, and cultural structures that had supported Europe for decades were starting to crack. The idea of progress no longer felt unquestionable, and many artists began to sense that traditional artistic language was no longer sufficient to express the complexity of the world around them. This atmosphere had a direct impact on academic painting. The great historical and heroic themes that had dominated art for so long began to feel distant and disconnected from everyday reality. Society was changing rapidly, and with it emerged a more introspective gaze, one concerned less with past glories and more with inner unease. In this context, even artists trained in classical traditions started turning toward darker subjects, not as a trend, but as a natural response to their surroundings. Ahasuerus at the end of the world is born precisely at this point. The painting does not look back to the medieval origins of the legend, but instead toward a sense of ending that was already being felt at the time. The empty landscape, the absence of civilization, and the extreme solitude do not simply illustrate the myth. They reflect how Europe was beginning to imagine its own future. A Europe that was culturally brilliant on the surface, but internally exhausted, starting to feel that its way of understanding the world no longer worked, even though it still did not know what would come next. I would love to know what you think about this painting, whether you are already familiar with it, and of course, if you believe there is something more worth adding, feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. Thank you very much for watching until the end, and I will see you in the next video.